changing systems is scary because inevitably we are standing up against those who have power in that system. And if we are challenging those in power, we're putting ourselves at risk. So the irony is that our spiritual practice is what prepares us for that work. And one of the inevitable destinations of our spiritual work is doing that kind of liberatory practice, trying to build a world where more people have access to their full humanity, and where my access is not in the way of your access, that our collective humanity is not limited. Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Welcome back, Curious Hearts. This is episode 45, and we are coming very close to the end of what I envisioned for our very first season of Curious Hearts. When I set out to do this project, my goal was to have one episode per spiritual principle or spiritual practice in the way that I have originally outlined them, and then to intersperse with that various interviews with folks from all different experiences. And I have learned so much in this first season. I have 3 more episodes to record with just solo me, and I have a number of interviews scheduled. But I just want to put it in your radar that I'm starting to think about what comes next for the podcast, and I wanted your input. So if you have ideas or requests or suggestions about what would make this the most useful time for you, I would absolutely love to hear them. You can comment wherever you are listening or watching this episode. You are welcome to shoot me an email at hello@veralester.com, or just shoot me a message on Substack, which is where the podcast gets managed. And I will take all of that into consideration. Our episode today is, to me, both incredibly important and also feels really timely to the world today. And that is that it is one of my core spiritual principles, which is that all spiritual practice, all spiritual life lands us in the same place, and that is the direction of spiritual justice and service work. It feels important in the current moment because the world feels sort of scary right now. I started this podcast, the original subtitle of the podcast was Making Meaning in a World on Fire, right? So when we're in the face of potential climate apocalypse, when we're having extraordinary weather events, when there is mass upheaval to the political order as we have known it, not just in the United States where I live, but really all over the world, in a way that feels like the ground is shifting underneath us, right? The New World Order of the United Nations and all of us doing our very best to avoid massive armed conflict also seems to be maybe have a question mark. The things that have been the foundation of the wider world for my entire life are effectively in question right now. And from a personal standpoint, for each one of us, I think that our spiritual practices are essential in this moment. I think that we cannot navigate a massively changing world unless we have the foundation of our spiritual lives. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to embark on this project. And it has continued to feel so important to me, and I hope useful to you in this process. So that's number one, WTF is happening out there. And when that is happening, when the economy is uncertain and politics are uncertain and the climate is unclear and what's happening with my job and how is this impacting me individually, we start to spiral a little bit. And it is incredibly common and reasonable in a lot of ways for all of that change and upheaval to initiate a sort of internal crisis, an existential crisis. Like, how am I existing? What is my role here? What's my responsibility? What's going to happen? How do I prepare? And that innate feeling of uncertainty and fear is one of the things that these practices give us the facility and the ability to face. So when life gets tremendously uncertain, when things start to change, when we feel afraid, when we have trouble sleeping, when we're not sure what's going to happen next, either globally or locally, it may initially feel useless. It might feel fruitless to lean on our spiritual practices, to like just turn off all of our devices, turn off the radio, shut off our notifications, and just sit still and breathe for a few minutes. It may feel absurd to sit and sing or to make something, either with crayons or markers or colored pencils or clay. It might feel pointless to plant flowers. It may seem silly to be working in a way that is not directly impacting, in an obvious way, our material well-being or our personal well-being. Maybe it's a little easier for all of us to move into community, right? That seems like, okay, well, maybe that's something that will help me, right? That's something that will relieve this feeling of panic, is if I phone a friend, right? If I go to a community meeting, if I go out to dinner with my family and just like focus on the people that are in front of me right now. That those are things that are useful, right? We're like, oh yeah, that's something that might help. Maybe going outside, right? Watching the sunset. All of these to me are spiritual practices. Stillness, meditation, focusing on our breath, creative practices, connection and community, being in nature. All of those are spiritual practices. They are practices that bring us back to our connection with all that is, with our own internal self that we don't quite understand and cannot name. But when we reroute back into ourself and we start to find that sense of who we are before our job and our nationality and our name and our ego, that then we can start to move from that same place. That's like, okay, how do I cope? Right? And sometimes in chaos and things that are disrupting or scary, whether they're like personal to your life or more global, when we feel scared, leaning into those practices that are incredibly comforting. Come see. Hup. Good job. When we feel scared, when we feel unmoored, leaning into those spiritual practices that bring us great comfort, well, that makes sense. That's like an immediate one-for-one coping mechanism. Right? We can take a deep breath. Maybe we can roll over and get back to sleep. Maybe our heart rate starts to settle, our breath starts to settle. If over time we continue to do those practices and we build that foundation of connectedness, we have a sense of connection to our inner self, our inner well-being, the wealth and depth of aliveness and presence that's available to us in all moments. I believe it is inevitable to initially first, we get to a place of like, oh, I'm no different from anyone else. I'm not better than or worse than anyone else. And in fact, all beings, at the very least, all human beings, have this same struggle, number one, and it might look different based on, their lived reality, like, their parents and their family and financial and educational situation and all that. Like, the material reality may differ, but that internal angst and existential crisis is something that we all share. And also that internal wealth, that internal nourishment, that peace, that steadiness, that okayness is available to all of us. And it's why I lean on spiritual principles like there's only one of us, because that is not just a teaching of so many different traditions, but it is also the natural evolution of my practice. It is the thing that I have discovered over sitting and practicing on my own, but also being with others and relating to others and being in the practices with other people. You can't go it alone, right? I mean, you're starting to hear all of these things over and over again. We've got now layers of learning and practice on top of each other. So when we have that realization, when it's like, oh, right, this sucks. We're all having a hard time. Everybody's carrying a struggle that I don't know anything about. I have no idea if you just got divorced or if you're terrified at work or if you haven't slept in a week or whatever it may be. And conversely, like, there are a few things that I love more than celebrating strangers in their triumph, right? That moment of like extraordinary success or glee. I think that that's a human drive. I think that we are thrilled when we see other people excelling, right? It's like, I think it's why we love shows like America's Got Talent, right? Or The Voice or the Dancing with the Stars, right? It's like we want people to succeed and to succeed in extraordinary ways. That thrill that we get when we see somebody else thriving, right, I think is also an evidence of our interconnectedness, right? That regardless of what we might call it, we can see the reinforcement of this in traditions and stories from across the world, right? The simplest example of it is the golden rule, right? Which is do unto others as you would have others do unto you, right? Treat somebody else the way you would want to be treated. That's a way that we teach children and sometimes adults that we're interconnected, that like what you do to yourself, you also do to others. What you are doing to others, you do to yourself. So this is a very helpful just side note that if you are having a hard time being kind to yourself, start being extraordinarily kind to the people that you meet. Start to go out of your way to be thoughtful and helpful and generous to the people around you. And you may find that it's easier for you to then be thoughtful and generous and kind to yourself. Vice versa, if you notice yourself like spinning out, like telling a story about what a piece of shit you are and how you have screwed up and what a disaster you have made of your life, number one, you're not alone. We all have those moments and those days and those thoughts. And it's not true. I don't care what you have done. I don't believe that's true. And finding the ways to be kind to ourselves, to be generous, to be forgiving with ourselves also allows us to be kind and forgiving and generous to others, right? So it's a one-for-one in my experience. So if we're working with the golden rule, if we're working with a sense of interconnectedness, if, it's like we can look at traditions from all over the world, right? From the Indian tradition, there are so many stories of Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma or whoever showing up in human form as a way of sort of testing the humans to see like if they can be kind and generous to someone who doesn't look like the divine. This is the foundational story of the Christian tradition, right? Here are these people who they're outsiders, they're outcasts, they have nowhere to go. It turns out that they are about to bring forth like one of the most extraordinary beings who's ever walked the earth. In what little I know of African traditions, right? Ubuntu is a core principle that says what makes me human is the same as what makes you human. That your very existence is what allows me to exist. Your humanity is my humanity. And so as a result, we are inextricably linked. God bless the wisdom of the native tribes who lived in this land before we did, right? And the wisdom of 7 generations. Can I make decisions that will positively impact 7 generations from now? That is your 5th great grandchildren. How overwhelming. What pressure. But all of these traditions have been trying to reinforce into our tiny little brains, it's not about you. Or rather, it's not only about you. That possibly the most important thing you can do while you are living in this life, in this body, for these 80 or 100 years, to roughly quote the Dalai Lama, you have this snapshot of a life on earth. Use it for the benefit of others. Find a way to make someone else's day or week or month or life better, brighter, more fulfilling, more joyful, more connected. And so if that is where we're operating from, if I am operating from a place of my well-being on every level is directly dependent, is the same as your well-being on every level, how much you're getting to eat, how is your body feeling, are you getting enough sleep, have you had a really great hug today? When's the last time someone told you you were extraordinary or so funny or kind or generous? When's the last time someone said they loved you and you believed them? If I know that you are cared for, then I am cared for. And when that is the place that I am operating from, it means that I cannot tolerate systems that cause suffering. Because even if I'm not the one who's suffering, even if I am not the one who's going hungry, even if I am not the one who has no other choice but to enlist in the military in order to get a GI Bill and suddenly spends 300 days on an aircraft carrier. Even if I, was born into white lady American skin and I don't have a lived experience of what it's like to be a Black woman in America or an immigrant in the United States, just because I don't have those lived experiences, any system that puts those folks at harm also puts me in harm. Anything, any government, any law, any business, any social structure that creates that harm to someone over something they have no control, that is not something that is tolerable to me. Full stop. And I want to make it very clear that, and this is the place where I get in trouble because I am at my nature a devil's advocate and I have a tendency of seeing all sides in a circumstance. I am not talking about those people over there who are doing harm to these people over here. I am talking about systems that reinforce cruelty and systems that create conditions where some folks have enough to eat. Some folks have so much food available to them that food spoils, while other folks go hungry. The system that is built like that, at the very least, is inefficient, and I want to enhance the efficiency of that system. I believe that humans create systems, and we can recreate systems, And we can adapt and adjust and mold and edit the things that aren't working super well. We can lean towards efficiency. And when something is just tragically broken and more harmful than it's helpful, I believe that we have the agency and the creativity and the innovation to build a new system. And there comes a point in our spiritual life where there is no reconciling harmful systems in the world, right? A government that makes it impossible for someone to access basic health care. An international financial system that makes it such that based on where you're born, you have massive access to education and clean water, or you don't. Those kinds of settings become something that are simply intolerable. And it's not, in my experience, that we wake up one day and we go, oh, I'm going to go out there and change the world. In fact, it's the opposite. Often, and I'm speaking only for myself now, you probably don't know anybody else like this. When I was young, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to fix everything. I wanted everybody to be safe and happy, right? And I thought I knew the best way to do that. And I thought that the people who were on the other side were wrong and that they were evil. And I could probably come up with all sorts of reasons why that was happening, but it was still like, okay, well, they're bad people. They're evil. And I am good. And I'm going to come fix it. Well, I don't know if you have ever interacted with somebody who has that attitude, right? Someone who walks into a project meeting, right? Maybe they're a new hire, and you've been working on a project for a really long time. And there are so many intricacies into the system and like reasons that things are done in the order that they're done, reasons that, we talk about them the way that we do, their choices that we've made over many months and maybe years. And somebody new comes in and they're like, oh, well, this is dumb. And I'm going to tell you how it should be fixed, right? And they don't have any of the context. They don't have any of the history. They don't understand that maybe you've tried it the way that they are suggesting. And as good as an idea it seemed, it didn't work. So over the course of time, in my personal practice, I have found that what happens is I become less rigid about the final outcome of things. I have less idea about the correct way. And instead, I am interested in simply moving things towards more justice, more balance, allowing resources to be more freely spread, encouraging people to seek their own solutions, empowering people to believe that they have the brilliance and the capacity and the creativity to create a solution that is better for them and better for all of us. And to identify the people who are operating from a place of fear and scarcity, which in my experience, fear plus scarcity is greed and power over others. It's just inevitable. That when I see folks who are operating in that place, this is another episode that is forthcoming. But when I see folks who are operating from that place, I am not interested in condemning them, but I am interested in redirecting them and giving them new resources, at least making new resources available to them. To, again, come all the way back to what we talked about before, that inner place of safety, that inner place of ease and fullness and nourishment and abundance, that like inner okayness. I'm okay. I don't have to always get more. I don't need somebody else to lose in order for me to win. That in fact, we all can, maybe we're going to compete healthily to get there. I don't have an opinion about the flavor of the system that will come. But when something is not operating in a safe, healthy way, when it is actively causing harm to folks, that is not something I can tolerate. And so moving into our life outside of our practice, because what is the point of our practice besides to help us live in the world as better versions of ourselves? When I start to walk outside into the world, into my practice, suddenly my energy is just naturally being directed towards being in service and support of others and finding ways that I can meaningfully impact harmful systems so they're less harmful. That's it. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. So we get hung up, we get stuck in words like social justice because social justice warriors and like so many of us have been around. This is like sort of the shadow, unfortunately, of social justice work, I fear. We have been around those young social justice warriors, of which I was probably one, who really think they know better. There's a sense of condescension at best and often condemnation, an unwillingness to learn. There's a lack of humility is really what's happening. And those folks who are working inside of social justice systems without a deep and profound spiritual base go off the rails at, I would argue, the same rate as people who are building the harmful systems to begin with. Do those social justice folks cause as much harm? No, probably not. We cannot have one without the other. We cannot have deep work committed to liberation, whatever that means to you, right? Whether that is deconstructing a system that means that it's more advantageous to be a white lady than a black lady. That's just like one example. Or it's more advantageous to be a man than a woman. Or it's more advantageous to like be a woman and versus being a trans woman. Putting that in quotation marks if you're not watching. That systems that create those kinds of like arbitrary binaries where like one identity or one person or one, culture, caste, any of that is harmful, right? It's like you get things inherently, right? We call this privilege, whatever you want to call it. I don't actually care the words that we use. But if you are interested in deconstructing the systems or reconstructing the systems that we're all swimming in all the time, so that more folks have access to resources, more folks have access to healthy food, clean water, safe places to live, people have access to joy and creativity, people have access to deep and profound spiritual experiences, people have access to the opportunities to make something, building companies or businesses or writing books, making podcasts, making music that positively impact the other beings on the planet. I want that for everybody. I just want that for everybody. And so anything that's standing in the way of that is actively standing in the way of my spiritual well-being, but also of my spiritual development. And so part of spiritual practice is one, training ourselves, training our inner capacity to be in difficult circumstances, to have challenging conversations, to step forward and be courageous when we're the only one who's doing it. And to feel that sense of inner support and inner nourishment, even when everything on the outside world says that this is dangerous and this is scary. Because changing systems is scary. Because inevitably we are standing up against those who have power in that system. And if we are challenging those in power, we're putting ourselves at risk. So the irony is that our spiritual practice is what prepares us for that work. And one of the inevitable destinations of our spiritual work is doing that kind of liberatory practice, trying to build a world where more people have access to their full humanity, and where my access is not in the way of your access, that our collective humanity is not limited, but in fact, when you have access to a broader perspective, when you have access to a fuller heart, when you can connect more deeply to your ancestral lineage, more deeply to the wisdom of your body, more deeply to your own spiritual guidance, I can too. And so that is the world that I am imagining. That is the world that I am building. That is the world I would like to move towards. And my experience inside of spiritual work is that desire is inevitable. So the natural outcome of your spiritual practice is social justice work. It's not the only outcome, but it is absolutely one of them. And if you are already doing that work, I just want to say thank you, because what you are doing is contributing to my spiritual development and our spiritual connection. And if this episode lands for you on a day when you have felt powerless or hopeless or frustrated, you have felt like the whole weight of the world is like so deep in your belly that you are having a hard time stepping forward, first, I want you to just stop and turn off all your devices, turn off the radio, and be still for a little while and reconnect to your breath. And then I'm going to encourage you to find the one small thing that you can do that feels generous, that feels kind, the thing that you feel would make someone else's life a little richer, a little better, a little easier, a little brighter today. And to keep doing those tiny things, the tiniest things, until you find the place where your unique gifts magically will make the world better, right? Where you can direct your unique skill set, your unique experience into a world where more of us have access to our extraordinary hearts, more of us have access to the depth of our humanity, and we are more connected to each other, and we are more loving. If I have a mission for this podcast, that's it. It's that whoever lands here hears something that awakens a tiny part of their spirit where they go, wait, there's something in here that I need to listen to. There's something in here that makes me unique. And there is a precious gem that I can offer. Because I believe that the more of us have that kind of awakening of our own unique gifts and our own inherent generosity, the more free we will all be. I'll close with a very old mantra. This is a Sanskrit mantra that is either Vedic or from the early Upanishads, right? So like if you're a yoga scholar, whatever, that means something to you. But generally, let's just say it's like 2,000 years old, maybe a little older. And the mantra is Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be at ease. Sometimes this mantra is translated, may all beings everywhere be happy and free. But I have a hard time even visualizing what happiness or freedom means. So I come back to that word sukino, which means like goodness, easy. It's like you step into a perfectly temperate pool and you float naturally, and the sun is just bright enough, but it's not too bright that you're hot, and the water is cool enough but not so cool that you're cold, and there is a sense of balance and ease in that moment. And that is what I wish for all beings everywhere. All beings. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May you be safe today. May you be happy today. May you have a sense of freedom, and may you be in deep ease. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.